Afghanistan's film and TV industry has been struggling to get back on its feet following decades of war. Conservative traditions plus a lack of funding and personnel have limited the industry's development. But now some brave filmmakers are trying to change that, even risking their lives. CCTV's Natalie Carney explains.
Shawaruddin and Habibullah are hard at work restoring hours of Afghanistan's history. Many of these decade-old films have only been seen by these two men, and now us.
Look, you see this film? Due to the rain and dust, it's in very bad condition. So what's on it is not very clear.
Afghanistan's film and TV industry was never as vibrant as its neighbors India or even Iran for that matter, but it was incredibly important for the country's cultural and historical identity. And that's why people risked their lives to save what they could from the Taliban, who said all images were against Islam.
When the Taliban decided to burn these films, they started to burn them in this field.
Ahmed Shah Siddiqui, along with 10 others at the Afghan Film Commission, hid hours of negatives in secret rooms when the Taliban demanded all films be burnt. When the militants arrived, it was only the positives left in the shed that they discovered.
So this is the upstairs back of the shed. It was the films located in the front that the Taliban confiscated and then burned. So all the film that was hidden up here was not discovered. However, the Taliban later set light to the entire shed, and that's why some of the footage you see here has fire damage. Despite that, despite the very hot conditions up here, as well as other weather damage, this film, the Film Commission say, is relatively salvageable. So this film will later be restored, digitized, and then added to their archives.
We save these films because they represent our culture, our people's traditions, historical artifacts from the provinces of Afghanistan, which have disappeared over time. They also highlight those historical sites that were destroyed during the wars. When we have peace in our country, the Ministry of Culture and Information can rebuild those destroyed artifacts or historical sites by using our films.
Today, Tolo TV is known for pushing back against Afghanistan's conservative traditions and breaking taboos. Tonight is the finale of Afghan Superstar, a TV show highlighting some of the best musical talents in the country, something unimaginable under the Taliban.
Bringing female singers on stage in 2003 and 4 and 5 wouldn't be possible. But in 2014, you can see the change in the country. Threats are problems, always, but you have to be careful. Someone has to do it, and we're doing it, because what your audience wants, what the normal Afghan wants. So I would say a couple of terrorists or a couple of conservatives wouldn't be standing on our way.
After many years abroad training in film, Jaweed Taiman has come back to Afghanistan to train up the next generation of filmmakers.
This is media, film is media, and through this you can educate a lot of people, you can pass on a lot of positive messages, and if you're an Afghan, you can make films about your country to show a positive image about your country rather than negative stuff that's been shown on television.
Afghan films are beginning to make a name for themselves on the international stage, in part by pushing back against taboos that stem from the country's difficult history. Thanks to the heroic efforts of those who understood the importance of TV and film to a culture, people once only behind the scenes are now being given a voice, while Afghanistan's beautiful history is being unveiled. Natalie Carney for CCTV in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Well, you can see Natalie's full story on the film industry in Afghanistan online, or catch it on Saturday on Assignment Asia. Now, Afghanistan has an active media and film industry. That's in large part due to the massive amount of funding from the US and other countries since the Taliban was driven from power 15 years ago. Now, there are, of course, success stories, but there are also stories of millions of dollars wasted. CCTV Sean Caleb's lived in Kabul for a year working at the US Embassy, in part overseeing grant money used to bolster the media and film industry. So, as we saw, Natalie's story really highlighted the heroic effort to save Afghanistan's film history from being destroyed by the Taliban.
I really don't think we can stress that enough. These guys put their lives on the line. The Taliban came in, the Afghan Film Institute is really 2 blocks from the US Embassy. They came in with guns and said, we have the film, is there any more? If we find more, we're going to kill you. They had built that false wall put a bookshelf up and put a bunch of Taliban paraphernalia there so the Taliban would have no reason to look behind that wall. There was no air conditioning, no heating going to where that film was for years, so it was damaged significantly during the time the Taliban was in power. Now, the frustrating thing is, for years, people have been trying to digitize and preserve that. In fact, when I worked at the embassy, that was one of my jobs, was to find a way to do that. We had cut a deal with Martin Scorsese's foundation, the World Cinema Foundation. They brought in somebody to look at restoring the film and look at digitizing it. There was a deal in place where they were going to take the film, digitize it, then give all the originals plus the digitized film back to Afghanistan. It fell apart. Why? Because of greed and corruption and short-sighted politics, which unfortunately has been the story of Afghanistan for such a long time. I'm glad to see they're working to restore it, but it was a wonderful report by Natalie, but they're a long way away from having the material and the know-how to take care of that properly.
And clearly this is an issue that people are very passionate about. So Sean, help us understand the story of Afghanistan's film industry. How is it faring and why is it so important?
Well, one thing that the U.S. and other nations did when they came into Afghanistan after the Taliban was driven from power was want to somehow control the information that was getting out. So the United States set up a program to, in essence, work on that. And they provided a lot of funding, millions of dollars in funding for filmmakers. And there were a lot of really good young filmmakers. There's one that I got to know very well, Sharbanu Sadat. And at 20, the first film she made, it was shown at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival. So here's this wonderful little Hazara woman from Afghanistan. Her first trip out of Afghanistan was to the Cannes Film Festival. Imagine going from one environment to the other. Well, she has been successful, and she's working on, I believe, her 4th film. But I talked to her this week about this story, and she said the film industry is suffering because a lot of the money that the U.S. and other countries had been bringing in to prop up these films is drying up. And that country has much bigger problems than film. So the amount the government has, it's not going to help buffet filmmakers. And there's another area called the French Cultural Institute, and that had been an oasis, if you will, for the creative outlet in that country. They would show films at that institute. Well, it was the site of a horrific bombing shortly, but I understand that it is now back up and running, so hopefully the wonderful people there are still doing the great work they've always done.
Now, I also want to get to other sectors outside of film. You also have TV and radio. How is that industry doing? We heard Natalie talk about Tolo TV.
Yeah, a lot of money went to the TV industry, too, to get programming out there that would back up what the Afghan government, the democratic government, wanted. Tolo TV has been a great success. If you look at Saddam Husseini, there's some video that we shot there a couple of years ago when we were there. Saddam Husseini is pretty much one of the leaders in the TV industry there, and he did a lot to put good quality programming, aggressive news gathering on the air. But remember, there was another horrific attack. The Tolo employees leaving that site in a bus a couple of months ago, the Taliban targeted that bus and killed so many people. And I talked to Sharbanu, the filmmaker, and she said she knew everyone on that bus. It's a close-knit community. I hope it thrives. I don't mean to bring a negative message here, but they are fighting so much to succeed in a country that has been beaten down for so long.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Very passionate there, Sean Calebs. Thank you for joining us.